Hello, and welcome to this brief introduction and demonstration of MIDIAmigo. MIDIAmigo is a new app for Android that is currently being developed. We want to showcase what it is capable of already. Who is MIDIAmigo intended for? Typical users for the MIDIAmigo app would be musicians who work with electronic musical instruments that support MIDI. Examples of such instruments are keyboards, synthesizers, sound modules, MIDI controllers, sequencers, drum computers, and other hardware or software devices tailored for music production. The MIDIAmigo app can connect with these kinds of devices via MIDI, but the app itself is not a digital audio workstation, or DAW. Instead, MIDIAmigo is a MIDI router and an advanced modular MIDI processor. The app is intended for electronic musicians who want or need to go deeper with MIDI on Android. It not only has a lot of features, but it specifically has functionality that is seldomly found in other MIDI apps on Android. It can therefore be a real lifesaver when it comes to connecting MIDI devices that would normally not understand each other. Although the MIDIAmigo app has a logical structure, it is probably not a beginner's app. Intermediate knowledge of the MIDI protocol is highly desirable when using MIDIAmigo. A graph of modules. MIDIAmigo provides all kinds of MIDI processing modules for routing and working with MIDI streams. These modules can freely be created and connected in a graph, so that MIDI messages can flow through them. The graph is designed in the main screen, and the modules can be configured in detail in the module screen. Let's demonstrate this, using a very simple example. The main screen. Long pressing on the canvas opens a menu, via which new modules can be created. Let's create a simple graph now. We create a MIDI in module, a log module, and a MIDI out module, and connect them. We can set the source and destination MIDI devices. Let's connect MIDIAmigo to a Korg Kronos synthesizer workstation, via USB. By default, we're in design state. In this state we can edit the graph, but no MIDI processing takes place. By going to run state, the play button on the toolbar turns yellow, and the app processes MIDI messages coming from the Kronos. You can see each note being played in the log module. And parts of the graph light up yellow whenever MIDI messages are detected. Back in design state, you can see that there are a lot of options to change the modules and connections in the graph. There are means for selecting modules, renaming, moving, copying, pasting, and deleting modules. There's also zooming, panning, and auto-scrolling while drawing connections. We can replace modules and keep their connections intact. And we can set modules in bypass mode, so that MIDI messages flow through them without being processed. By clicking a single time on a module in the graph, we can give it focus. It gets a dashed border. Clicking once more on a focused module opens a pop-up menu. Via pop-up menus, some of the essential parameters of a module can be changed in the main screen. For instance, showing the log in hex, text, or both. But each module contains far more parameters than those available in its pop-up menu. By double-clicking on a module in the graph, we can view and modify all available parameters. We're then switching from the main screen to the module screen. The module screen. This screen is intended for editing modules in detail. Using the tabs at the bottom of the module screen, we can conveniently switch between the modules we created in the graph. And the tabs at the top reveal even more parameters per module. Setups. The graph configuration, together with the module parameter values, can be stored in a file called a setup file. So a MIDIAmigo setup file contains a graph of modules and all the parameter values in them. Let's open an example setup file created for this particular demonstration. There are modules for monitoring, filtering, remapping, and modifying MIDI messages. Let's have a look at them. It all starts with source modules, which receive MIDI messages coming from external devices or files, and introduce them into the app. The MIDI-in module. The MIDI-in module is a source module that can receive MIDI messages from external MIDI devices, connected via USB, Bluetooth, or from other MIDI apps on your Android device. Here are some additional parameters of the MIDI-in module. The SMF-in module. The SMF-in module is also a source module. It can read and playback standard MIDI files. Let's play some pre-recorded MIDI music right now. The SMF-in module can also play at different positions, speeds, pitch, and volume. The SMF-in module has several modes, like burst mode, in which the MIDI file is processed as fast as possible. And there's range mode, via which you can repeat a time range of a MIDI file. The log module. We already saw the log module briefly in action earlier, but it contains many more parameters. For instance, you can specify exactly which MIDI messages to log, and for which tracks, channels, CCs, zones, etc. MIDI messages are subdivided into 4 groups, as you can see. Channel messages, system messages, meta messages, and internal messages. Note that the internal messages are proprietary for the MIDIAmigo app. They cannot be used outside the app. They are pseudo MIDI messages, which add all kinds of convenient functionality in the app. You may find that the app's UI is rather consistent, also in its use of colors. And it also has a Get from MIDI feature, also known as MIDI Learn. The Lanes module. Just like the log module, the Lanes module is also a monitor module, but it shows the MIDI messages in a graphical way, in horizontal lanes. The Lanes module automatically detects new MIDI channels and controllers, and creates new lanes dynamically. It's a great diagnostic tool. The Chord module. The Chord module is able to analyze chords in real time, and also shows the currently played notes on a staff, and on a keyboard. The Mixer module. The Mixer module lets you mute, solo, or change the volume of individual MIDI channels. It also has a master volume fader. And it can be used as a MIDI channel monitor, showing the note activity on all 16 MIDI channels. The Curve module. With the Curve module, you can for example alter MIDI velocity curves and aftertouch curves, also in real time. MIDI curves for pitch, CC, and pitch bend values can also be modified. The Curve editor has got parameters for bottom and top values, and even for a bit of randomization. Curves can be linear, spline curves, or freehand curves. Just pick one of the templates, and start editing. Moreover, multiple curves can be defined, which can be switched between during run state. The channel filter module. The channel filter module can filter out messages from one or more MIDI channels. Based on the filter result, it forwards each MIDI message either to its pass output port, or to its filter output port. The script module. In MIDIAmigo, there's a script module, via which you can program in detail what should happen with each incoming MIDI message. The script module is the most flexible module in the MIDIAmigo app. The built-in AmigoScript programming language is loosely based on JavaScript, but it's specifically designed to inspect and manipulate MIDI messages. Let's load a very simple script first, which adds a fifth interval to each incoming note on MIDI channel 1. You're hearing the extra interval right now. Far more complex scripts can be created. For instance, scripts to automatically create glissandi and arpeggios. Or scripts with complex state machines. Even scripts for conversion of CC messages to system-exclusive messages or vice versa. This is also a good moment to point out that the MIDIAmigo app comes with extensive, context-sensitive help documentation. Each screen, dialog, module, MIDI message property, and built-in scripting function is documented. The MIDI out module. Usually a graph ends with one or more destination modules, like the MIDI out module, which transmits MIDI messages from the app to external devices. There are many more modules in MIDIAmigo, but for this introductory video, let's not expand too much right now. Background mode. There are also some parameters that apply to a setup file as a whole. Most notably, there's background mode. This is a special flavor of the run state. It lets MIDIAmigo process MIDI streams in the background, even if the Android device's screen is off. Global settings. Besides the module and setup parameters, MIDIAmigo also has a set of global parameters, which are not stored in setup files, but in dedicated global app storage. For instance, night mode, a tip of the day, and default MIDI source and destination. It's got built-in Bluetooth support as well. It will automatically pair with previously saved Bluetooth devices at startup. App versions. The MIDIAmigo app comes as a free version, and a paid, pro version. Neither of them have ads. Both of them operate offline, without an internet connection. The free version contains all functionality, but it has a time restriction of 1 hour. After an hour, the free app shuts down, and you will lose all data. Of course, you can run the app again, and start fresh. The free version also cannot write to external storage. But for the rest it is fully functional, like the Pro version. MIDIAmigo also comes with quite a few example files, which you can load, inspect, run, and learn from. These examples can always be used as a basis, also in the free version. Conclusion. This is the end of the introduction to the MIDIAmigo app. Hopefully you now have an idea of what the app is capable of, doing all kinds of processing of MIDI streams. Important. MIDIAmigo is still in development. It is not available just yet. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.